Okay, now we're going to take a look at 3D in Adobe Photoshop. And Adobe Photoshop's 3D is pretty expansive. There's a lot of tools and widgets and features. I don't know exactly what the 3D rendering engine is in Photoshop, but it's actually pretty good. The tools and the feature set is really rich. To work in 3D in Photoshop, the first thing we need to do is change the workspace to the 3D workspace. If you haven't already changed the workspace to the 3D workspace, when you try to initiate a 3D layer, it's going to change it for you, or it's going to ask you to change to that particular workspace. So you can change workspace by going to Window, Workspace, and you can see that the 3D workspace option is already set here. Here I have a particular setups for layers in a Photoshop file. I have a background texture, and I have this 3D text layer. It's just a flat text right now, and I want to turn this into a 3D object to give it some dimension, give it some depth, and add some lighting and stuff to it. So to get started, I'm going to go to the 3D menu, and I'm going to go to New 3D Extrusion from Selected Layer. And then it will start by giving it some dimension. You can see all the 3D controls start appearing. And I have a couple of different windows here. I have a window on the left-hand side, this small little widget that allows me to do things with the cameras. And I have another widget here, which is a different view, so I can look at a default view. I can look at the top, left, right, bottom, back, and front of the model. I'm just going to go back to the default. We have the 3D ground plane, and on the 3D ground plane you can see this is the x-axis. The blue is the z-axis, and the green is the y-axis. So the controls for moving about, again, in the widget here, I can orbit the camera just by clicking and dragging on that. I can also pan the camera, move around, and then this is dolly the camera, zoom in and zoom out. So I'm going to zoom out just a bit here. We also have these controls up here in the 3D mode in the control bar. So rotate, roll, drag, and scale. So there's a bunch of different options here. Now the widgets on the actual 3D object are very intuitive. You can see here we have the arrows like we saw in some of the other programs. The arrows have three little icons on them. The first icon is the arrow itself. So if I click the arrow here on the green arrow, that's going to move on that particular axis. I'm moving on that axis right now. The semi-curved option, when I roll over that, this allows me to rotate along that axis. So I'm rotating now on that axis. And then there's a square-shaped icon that allows me to scale on that axis. So not right now, I'm just scaling on the y-axis. And then there's a center box also, and that center box allows me to scale the entire 3D model up and down. So again, that's pretty intuitive. The entire 3D environment is set up in the layer in this 3D panel. So I have an environment which has some basic lighting and shadows and the ground plane and the controls for that. I have a scene set up with a camera and a light, and we can control the light direction, pivot the light, and control its direction and what it's pointing at. Notice how that's affecting the shadows. And then I actually have the 3D object itself, which is, in this case, the 3D extruded text. And you'll see that under that we have a bunch of different materials for the extrusion itself. There's some bevel materials, there's some inflation materials, some boundaries, etc. And then we have a default camera here and the current view camera. In the next video we'll continue and looking at other ways and other tools to use for 3D in Photoshop.